Welcome to the film analysis. Today with Scream Part 6 by Matt Battinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett. Scream 6 collected more than $44 million in its opening weekend. Not only did it greatly improve upon the start of last year's hit reboot Scream, but it crushed the series' opening weekend record previously set by Scream 3 with $34 million. This is not good news. First, let's look back at the horror series. To survive the 90s, you needed pop culture knowledge above all else. And you had to deal with irony and self-referentiality. The first three films in the Scream series were a testament to this. Wes Craven created something special. He captured the zeitgeist on screen. In the fourth part, the survivors of Woodsboro, led by Sidney Prescott, try to become tragic heroes by breaking away from this self-referentiality. They try to escape the simulation loops of the media world. In part 5, they fought back against fanfiction. Again, there were those moments of sadness that have always been present in the series. What is it like to live? This question always pressed for an answer, despite all the meta levels and sarcastic jokes. It is appealing to see the films as dramas dressed up in the horror genre to the respective zeitgeist. Now there's nothing left of that. In the past, meta-horror has saved the series from resembling almost all horror series. They get worse and worse, usually very abruptly after the first part. The sixth part is now the longest at 123 minutes. 3D inflates it. You can't waste your money any more stupidly, but that's not enough. Scream Part 6 is an appalling sellout, an endlessly stupid, meaningless, awful film. Only Neve Campbell didn't want to be squandered, turning down the offer to take on the role of Sidney Prescott again due to an insufficient salary. Let's be frank, the culture industry doesn't leave much room for illusions, but there was always the hope perhaps the Scream series would understand the cultural industry, reflect it on a meta level, parody it without being swallowed whole by it. But we must give up that hope now too. Scream Part 6 is the worst thing imaginable about a culture industry product. We are witnessing the great Marvelisation of Scream. The plot is banal, it's complicated but utterly pointless. Tara, Mindy and Chad are now studying in New York. Sam has also traveled to Manhattan. She doesn't want to live in Woodsboro any longer either, especially because she can look after her little sister there. It's supposed to be dangerous in New York. It is not long before Ghostface is up to his mischief again. And of course, they could all be behind the killer mask. The mask, which everyone can wear, stands for a signifier without significatum. It is like the meme culture for which or what a sign stands as variable. You can fill it with any content. Is it someone from the circle of friends? Has someone else from part 4 or 5 perhaps also moved to New York to do some outrageous deeds? These questions leave us completely cold. It is interesting that we have all these young people with a lot of screen time, but you will forget them immediately when you leave the cinema. They are all flat characters. If they get killed or not, it doesn't matter. At least Gale Weathers is back as the only veteran of the series. Sidney Prescott lets herself be excused. She has now earned her happy ending. Sam must deal with rumors circulating everywhere, spreading on the net. She is supposed to be the murderer, as she is the daughter of Billy Loomis, the killer from the first part. Are there any films these days that don't address the phenomenon of conspiracy theories? Probably not right now. The FBI also comes into play. Kirby from the fourth part reappears. In addition, there is police officer Bailey, who also has family ties to Sam's circle of friends. The imagery is in no way original. The Scream series was always a palimpsest, but that didn't mean arbitrariness. The genre models shone through the images. Scream 6, however, doesn't differ at all from the other New York films. Trying to copy the atmosphere of Todd Phillips' Joker film seems particularly silly. It doesn't work at any point. The cardinal mistake, however, lies in having left Woodsboro for 3 reasons. Firstly, New York plot holes. In many scenes you could simply call the police or stop a police car. You could do something. You could also turn to the neighborhood. But none of that ever happens. Why do they keep walking stupidly for dozens of blocks instead of alerting someone? It's unbearable. You must have your brain completely shut down to even sustain the goofiness. Secondly, New York as a setting requires quite the idiosyncratic approach. Otherwise, everything looks the same, as is the case with Scream 6. Thirdly, the film would be well set in Woodsboro. Why? Many horror films take place in closed-off areas, places that cannot be easily left. Limiting the location of the action bears a dramaturgical power, builds tension, creates a microcosm. But Scream 6 doesn't feature any handle to deal with New York. One never feels present in the city. There's only one interesting scene. They take the subway on Halloween and there is not one person wearing the ghost face mask, but a lot of people suddenly. What if there were not just 1, 2, 3 perpetrators, but many more? What if personalization is no longer possible at all? What if everyone is Ghostface? You could reinvent the genre and possibly take it to its limits. One could study the virality of internet trends increasingly affecting cinemas when people gather there via TikTok and trash everything in excess of violence. It follows the attention economy. Virality in the sense of contagion, where the originator is no longer quite clear or there is none. The ghost face mask could wonderfully illustrate the phenomenon, possibly rendering the classic whodunit structure of the Scream series obsolete. But this film, unlike its predecessors, is not up to snuff at all. However, it represents an unintentional expression of our times. And Mindy, a film nerd, does know what's happening and enlightens her friends. We are in a franchise. We return to the meta level. It ultimately treats the audience cynically. The name Scream lures the audience without the film having anything in common with the previous parts. Without the mask appearing every now and then, you couldn't recognize the film. What is the logic of a franchise? Well, according to Mindy, it must be bigger, more surprises, more violence. No one is safe anymore, not even the main characters. And what is it about? Mindy says to push intellectual property. Of course, there are all these rights holders to the Scream series and they continue to make money from it. Yes, it's all done very transparently. and all the characters can be sacrificed so that the franchise may live on. We know that from Marvel, and we know from Marvel that the actors are completely interchangeable. The franchise structure could have been a tool, a critique of the franchise system on a meta level, but it's not about that at all. It's about establishing a franchise with Scream. And it is interesting that it is even worse than Marvel, where one or two new characters receive their own film and the characters have something sometimes. We have here only flat characters. The Scream characters are irrelevant. It's pure cynicism, which we certainly know from the Marvel films. Take Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, where the end basically states, everything you just saw doesn't matter. Or let's think of Deadpool's cynicism, where the audience is fed something and told to eat it. Scream 6 basically features a family tree, resulting in genealogical research. Who was responsible for what? Also regarding the victim side. Will Sam manage to get her little sister into therapy? That is the real basic conflict of this film. The perpetrator side is no longer concerned with media spectacle and movie nerds gone wild. It's just family members wanting revenge. Of course, you could play with the franchise meta level, but the meta level is only briefly mentioned here as it somewhat belongs to the series. But there's a big return to tribalistic structures. One must divide up some family clan strife. We are basically somewhere between Black Panther and Avatar. In that sense, the film reflects the zeitgeist, but Scream submits to that zeitgeist. As usual, with any franchise, half of the film consists of explanations. In lengthy dialogues, the characters must somehow keep the dramaturgical house of cards from collapsing on behalf of the makers. And as with Marvel, even the fans hardly understand what is happening. After all, it doesn't matter. It's all about flashy effects for effect's sake. And it all leads to a vicious revenge. It's not like the early Scream films where the victims want to assert themselves as subjects in somewhat. Instead, it's all about a form of revenge in which you end up asking yourself who is good or evil. The sides have already been reversed a few times. But what else is happening here? At the same time, they are quite literally turning the old parts into a museum piece as a conservational act. The finale takes place in a Scream museum. All the previous films are gathered there. Someone has collected the ghost face masks of all the previous killers and stored them in glass cases. The museum and its battle bury the series at the same time. The cinema screen becomes a glass case touched with greasy fingers. When the film speaks of legacy, it refers to two things: the intellectual property that can always be marketed and the tribalistic thinking. In the end, it's all about clan structures. And there is another question. Why are we so bored by this drastic brutality? The film is rated R. In fact, there is wild poking with all kinds of knives. Scream 6 features quite some shooting. Blood is common in a slasher. But here, brutality rather stems from a rampant lack of imagination. Just as crude slaughter has replaced stylized killing, eroticism too has been replaced, as sexuality in general has migrated to hardcore pornography. In these scenes, we do not witness any virtuoso cuts. We are not seeing the art of the slasher here, but are situated in a kind of butchery. And the slasher genre, starting with the giallo film, new stylization. Halloween also excelled in its pretense. In the past, technology and masks limited films, rendering realism impossible. There was always a slight shift. Nothing of that has remained now. You have unbelievably perfect pictures now. You could say realistic. And at the same time, an artificial intelligence program like DALL-E can simply generate these images. It is nothing special anymore. So pure brutality is nothing but boring. We are witnessing a generic image production. The slasher genre would have to reinvent itself, and not only for this Scream series. There is no appeal in this explicit perfection. It's just a boring poking around in nothingness, so that we watch but don't see. It would be nice if you would like to support the film analysis financially. You can do so via my bank account or PayPal. Also, you can find me on Patreon. Thank you very much.